time comment, whether you're here or not, because it is an absolutely incredibly singular and amazing performance. So thank you so much. The first thing I really wanted to ask you, and we will have an opportunity at the end for a couple of audience questions, but the first thing I really wanted to ask you is beyond the woman that we saw in the headlines and the woman that everyone around the globe in her face and her mannerisms, you were finding her as a character, and I heard you say that she was easy to absorb, to come into your being, but I'm sure there was a moment when you knew you found not Princess Diana, the future Queen of England, but really just Diana Spencer. And I'm just curious, was that a moment with costuming? Was it a moment with the voice? What was that moment where you knew you really found her?
At a certain point, I just had to kind of believe the guy that was teaching me the accent, because that's like kind of where everyone lands in terms of whether or not something is right. Because the only really like cross-referenceable material would be like how she sounds, what she looks like, and in terms of what she actually like thought and felt, that's up to all of us completely. And I do love the fact that the movie allows you to bring your own experience to this thing. I don't think there was like a particular moment. I think like I had like a year and a half to kind of allow this to loom over me. I knew about the movie for like a year and a half before we started shooting. I had this great coach. Like there's no key to it. I think even once we started shooting, I had to defer and just believe the people that were around me, and I think that they would have lied to me anyway because we had to start shooting. It was like, well, you've had 4 months, girl. Like if you're not here yet, this is where we are. But yeah, I think as we went through everything, there are things that I like love about certain details, and then you just take all the details that you fall in love with and put them together, and everything that you don't know for sure, that's where you are allowed to bring yourself to it. And those are the gaps that we were able to fill in. And it's hard for me to identify like the things where I felt like really landed correctly. The whole thing kind of exists in this abstract weirdness, and it's all very really selfish. I think everything that I really love about her might be totally wrong, but those are the things that I put like all my money on.
It's interesting that you say that, because that was the thing that struck me when I saw it for the first time at a film festival, is the dissonance of just her existence in this story. From one aspect in particular was her voice. She has this like floating, sort of melodic, almost bird-like voice that she would say was cutting, and sometimes bizarre things like I'm gonna chop up all my dresses. And I loved that dissonance in her, and it is underscored with even like the score going from, it feels like jazz influences to classical world style instrumentals. And yeah, I want to hear about your conversations with Paulo about that dissonance in the performance, because it is a beautiful off-key melody that we have forgotten.
Yeah, I mean the way that she was ever given an opportunity to connect with the people that she wanted to connect with was either that somebody was lucky enough to be in a room with her and have an undeniable human and personal experience that no one could weigh in on. And we have a pile of those, and people talk about those experiences, but we weren't there. And so I think all this stuff that we were privy to was like so like available to absolutely anyone. Like you could anything that we looked at, you guys could look at. We didn't have a particular like insight that was more special because we were making this movie. And Pablo has kind of, we share this awareness that like movies have an ability and a serious power to be personal in a way that's I hope it comes across in the movie, but like even if it was just our own sort of limited experience, like we could only absorb and then filter through this weird lens of cinema what we experience personally. The dissonance thing, there's a certain friction that's created with like juxtaposition. You take sounds like You guys just saw the movie. But like, you know, the montage. Like there's this one part of the movie that just scene where we were allowed to, even though we were making a movie about a speculative, non-existent, hypothetical 3 days, there must have been moments where this person was leading up to this choice, and there were conversations that were specific and self-referential, where maybe the kids probably did say like, hey, do you want to be the king? Mom, do you want to be the queen? Those things feel expositional and really specific, but I'm sure that those real people at some point do utter that shit.
Yeah.
And so like with the montage stuff, it was really nice to be able to step outside these 3 days and take everything that we love about this person and like kind of maybe even things that are frustrating or things that are impossible to understand and like lyrically allow them to live for a moment. Like whenever we were doing that montage stuff, he was playing pop songs and you know, we were listening to Talking Heads and Sinead O'Connor and stuff that just really went against the Johnny Greenwood score that ultimately was found. But knowing the moments of levity and the moments of sort of like exuberance and release that this woman must have felt when she was alone in her bathroom and setting it against a score that you also carry with you in all of the times of struggle, you get to hold her whole life in a moment. And that's what movies allow you to do. Like most of the time, you know, if we were to be trying to like be authorities on what happened, we would never get the opportunity to hold everything in a moment. We would be like embedded in one shitty argument or one, you know, embarrassing moment or one time that she felt really great, and you'd only have that. But if something feels great and you remember everything that sucks in the same instance, you just get to kind of have the whole life wash over you. And that like that's what a movie can do versus you know, I don't know, reading a book or doing something that's trying to be more conclusive.
Yeah, I really liked that, and also I'm glad they did the montage because we got to see you in that incredible recreation of Diana's wedding dress. Like that's where I was like, yes, I'm so good watching that. The other thing that you mentioned, the children, I thought was so interesting was your relationship with Diana's relationship with them on screen, but then also what you said, your relationship with them was behind the scenes, and how Pablo really sort of discussed, you know, I think you said you were like, at first I was like, these kids, I don't know what to do, but you guys really built a family, and you can see it in that moment when she finally is free, driving away, going to get KFC, which again, great choice. Yeah, talk about your work with the kids, because they're extraordinary, like you really do believe them and y'all's dynamic as a family.
Good. Yeah, I mean, like, to be honest, they were just cast very well. Like, those kids were really smart and wanted. I was really lucky. I think they were told, like, you know, I'm from LA, Pablo's from fucking Chile, like, it doesn't, like, we're like, I don't fucking know, I don't care. These kids were like, we do know, and we do care in a different cultural way. And they like improv these scenes in which they are so self-referential. Like one of these kids is like, you know, hey, do you want to be the king? He's like, I have no choice. That was not in the script. And when we were sitting there, it was the only scene that we shot with 2 cameras, so we could intercut the thing and have it live and feel spontaneous. And there were times where I was like, this is too specific. This is like, so it's like, you know, the screenwriter didn't even write this sort of on the nose. But it was so genuine. And it's interesting to think about people like that having the conversations that you imagine they might have in a candid way. And Pablo just was so, I mean, this was something that opened itself to him. He didn't always know why he was making this movie. I think he said in the last few weeks that what really surprised him was that he was making a story about a mother predominantly, like more so than the other things that the movie's about. And he's a dad, and like I'm the youngest in my family. I don't even have any like younger cousins really. Like I'm like not good with kiddo, not good, but like I'm not like mom. I don't have that thing. They brought it. They shoved it into my laugh. Like I watched the footage of her and I'm like, the most unconditional, most completely understandable version of this person, because she has such a sideways way of communicating. There's just not always a straightforward place for her to be. But the place that she winds up that is just impossible to not see clearly is her as a mom. And that's the most relatable part of her. Like, we're dealing with a person that's like singularly unknowable. And like, everyone here has a mom. Even if you don't know that person, like everyone here, like, you know, to a certain extent, even if it's in its loss, like, you know that. And he wanted to create this like three-headed, like, you know, animal that was this unshakable being thing. And I was just lucky because they super duper like wanted to love me. They were great and like so smart and so with it in every second. And I don't know, I just think those kids had to be English. They fucking knew.
I appreciate that. It translates in this because it's crazy that you said you're making this as outsiders, because it feels very insular, even in the imagined portions of it. You called her singularly unknowable, and I think that's very interesting, because the one thing I did take notice of was the costuming choices. Obviously this is imagined, but many of these outfits are documented. And I think you said, and I think it's probably true, she probably told as much of herself as she could through her clothes. Fashion was such a huge part of who she was as a person, as a public figure, and also internally. And I do love the idea of the choices of each of the outfits, and the costuming is its own separate, like, I would say, lead character in this, because it's not just about where she chooses to dress or if she wears the Boxing Day dress on Christmas. It's the armor that she used to sort of put herself through these very difficult moments. And I'm curious if you had conversations with Pablo or Jacqueline Moran, the Oscar-winning costume designer for this film, about that.
Like, other than her being such as like a style icon, where you go, you know, there are looks that have shaped how people wear clothes now. But beyond that, like, she's either looking like a person who wants to pull her dress up over her head like a 3-year-old, and it's so clear that she jumps out of the clothing in a way that is like so descriptive of who she is on the inside, whether or not what's on the outside reflects that. Like, it's the contrast that is communicative. And then there are times where she's a little bit older and she decides to really stand tall in something, and you can just see the time frame. You can see like the leap in growth. And I know that our movie's like really specific and is like, you know, highlighting the fact that she made distinct choices in order to be rebellious and all of that, but it's super fucking rare to make a movie where things feel thick, where you can't poke holes in the wardrobe. You can, like, every pocket works. Every time I've never been in an environment that was so steadfast, perfectly constructed, like with such integrity, where I was like, well, the last thing that is really concerning is that I need to be truthful and present and real and do a good performance, because everything else is so great. I've done movies where I look at the clothes and it's like, yeah, it's fine here. I mean, it's fine on camera, but here and now it feels fake and it's bullshit. And I mean, it's like such an incredible opportunity to work with things that hold you up.
I'm gonna go ahead and take it to the audience.
Yeah, let's move
now.
on. Yeah, totally. This has been great, by the way.
What's
up?
I was about to say, we're gonna take it to the audience, but I wanted to say, you guys, this is an award-winning actress where you get the chance to talk to her about the craft and the beauty that she put on the screen. So we know she had fun making the movie. But I'm gonna go to you guys next.
Hi. Bella.
Is your name Bella?
Isabella Edison.
Oh, sweet.
That's a good choice.
So, a motif I noticed in the film was in the score a clash between classical music and almost chaotic jazz. And to me, that seemed to symbolize almost how at least Diana felt with trying to present herself as a very proper icon versus the, you know, almost like the very human chaotic part she had to hide away. As like someone who's like been in the public eye as a celebrity for coming up like for a while now, was there a part of you that related to that? In that like having to kind of present yourself as an icon and almost like, or not icon, but like, is there a way to like,
I think I got you.
Yeah, right.
She's asking about the dissonance in the score, and I think a better way to maybe frame it is talking about just, yeah, that's right on. It's just that, the two different sides of herself, that she didn't necessarily like having to divide between the score sort of underscores that, and if you relate to that personally, but also I would ask how you try to convey that on screen in your performance.
Yeah, I mean, okay, so this movie does not endeavor to tell her entire story, but it definitely does attempt to feel it.
Yeah.
And so, I didn't know exactly what the movie was gonna sound like until I watched it, but I had like a few indicative moments, like, you know, Pablo would come over and play me a few minutes of the score, but I wasn't always sure how it was gonna be wielded, like how he was gonna really like use it. And Pablo talks a lot about like pacing and speed being such a huge tool that's not always like talked about, but it's absolutely everything when you're watching a movie. Like the reason you feel a vibration in your body in a room where people are talking at a certain speed and you're feeling it different ways because you're moving at a different pace. Movies allow us to like take elements and put them together and make a sort of distorted, weird feeling feel whole in a moment, because you can take like an image and an emotion of an actor's face and a sound and just like pin them against each other. That was his job. When I watched this movie, I was like fucking bowled over because I knew what I was doing in every moment, but I was always really present in those moments. And other than him playing music over like montage bits, or other than us doing the pearl eating soup and having the sort of the band in the room with us, I was always going against that. Like he was creating a friction, and so I can talk about that now, but when I was there, I was not even remotely aware of that. When I watched it and I saw like how committed he was to pushing this reality of certain scenes, and like, you know, you read the pearl soup eating scene and it could have been just like a moment, little flash of where like where she like looks down and considers the thing, and then maybe a flash of a tooth cracking, and then you're off to the next thing. We shot that thing for 3 hours, and like, it's a really long sequence. I don't know how long it is, but like I bet it's like 7 fucking minutes of just like staring this way, like, and then with the score, if you think about what's going on internally for her, she's like a cloudy person to understand, and the trumpet feels muffled, and when it starts to shriek and become like super shrill, I didn't have to hear that in the moment. That's collaboration. That's like, those are elements coming together. I mean, I'm sure that he like read the script, that Johnny read the script, and that he like planned for certain things, but he didn't know how far I was gonna go. I never knew how far Pablo was gonna push it in the edit. The job of a director is taking all of these elements and funneling them into like a very specifically felt notion, and then have it also at the end of the day, have every artist that was involved look at it and go, that was somehow the exact experience I felt, but greater, because now I can feel all these other elements coming in. It was directed, I mean, look, maybe some people fucking hate the movie, which is like, great, I respect the shit out of you for hating it. But I think that he did a really good job. Like, I was just like, I couldn't believe it. I was like,
I mean, folks that don't know, this film got a standing ovation, a very lengthy standing ovation, in all of its premieres, but especially when it was actually at the Princess Diana Theater at TIFF, and it is because of that incredible vision. Okay, I'm gonna go somewhere over here. I I see a hand right there. I can barely see you, yes. Yes.
I noticed that there was a Chanel collaboration. Was that intentional, or was that with costume designer? So I know she had like a Lady Dior with Christian Dior.
Asking about the Chanel, not that question, there's a lot of Chanel in this. Right here.
Well, she like loved Chanel and had like a super well, she had like a long history with them and so do I. And I like this whole thing. We can't make it perfect. We're not doing a documentary about this woman. The cool thing is that we met each other in this weird middle ground, like where people dream and fucking dance around fucking art. And did she wear Dior?
I think so.
Maybe
I'm
some
not a
classifications
fashionista,
might
but
show,
I'm
but
not called.
yeah. I'm no authority on this shit, but like I think the cool thing about this is that we were able to meet each other halfway. And she loved Chanel. There are so many weird stories about like, okay, so she was obsessed with Chanel, but also always wanted them to take the CCs off because it reminded her of Camilla and Charles. And I always found that whenever she decided to wear one of those suits, it always felt kind of powerful, and that was it was a nice way to melt. Also, even if I had no relationship with Chanel, I think that they probably would have been, had it been someone else, I still think that they would have wanted to be a part of this thing, but it was very intentional.
Okay, I'm gonna go straight ahead. Yes.
Hi, so was there like, in your research for the role, was there like any like contact with the actual like royal family? Do you know about their like response to the film, or like who were?
Was there any contact with anyone, even former Buckingham Palace aides or any of that you were able to do? Anything that was around her at that time?
Okay, so the writer, Stephen Knight, is a self-proclaimed student of all things English, and the reason he made this movie was because when she had passed away, he noticed such a hugely stark difference in the emotional response of his entire country, and even just his like relatives. He saw his mom fucking crying, and he was like, this is so weird, we don't do this, and then reached up to his own face and felt it like wet. And I only know this because I've met him once, and we did one Q&A in London at the premiere. And he said this, and I was like, there are so many things I wasn't able to talk to him about, but he spoke to a bunch of people that he is not even willing to disclose who they are. I think that a lot of people that worked in the houses that they were running around in were speaking to him, but he's like, I think that whatever, he never told us who those people were. There are people that work in the house. It's like there are a million memoirs that have been written. I see so clearly certain trains of thought that I didn't have the time to ask Stephen if those people were the people, but Darren is a chef that, you know, exists in real life, and that like loved her. And then I'm sure if I were to make a fucking guess that it was that guy, but I don't know because he's not allowed to say, or he doesn't want to say, he doesn't want to like blow anyone's spot. Have I talked to anyone in the family? No. You know, they keep pretty discreet and personal, and I don't mean that even in just a, you know, in kind of like a self-protective way. They've had to sort of endure our like deep curiosities forever, and the way that they deal with that is super reflective in the way they decide to live their lives, and because we are functioning from a place of pure, just desirous curiosity, just like we really have taken a really personal front step on this one. It is a work of fiction. We cannot know certain things. We did not talk to the real people. The writer did, and you can see, like, after I did all of my research, like, all of the things that seem kind of like gray and amorphous in the scripts, when you start reading the facts, they line up, and there are certain things that feel emotionally present but not specified. And I think that that definitely speaks to, like, his research, even though it's so understandable and so human and so relatable to be like, yeah, but did they say, and what do they say now, and what is it all? I feel the same way. Even in doing all of my research, I was like obsessed with The Crown. I was like just tearing through every memoir and all of the documentaries. All of that kind of floated up into a different place. Like, we made the movie for kind of different reasons. I hope that, you know, for anyone that is still, not still around, whatever, for her family members, I genuinely hope that it's understood, you know, from all of the things that have been made about them, and there's a lot. We don't profess to know if I hope I can say, well, you know, we love her. And in no way were we trying to learn more about her, but she, as an entity, as like a figure in history, she causes you to look at yourself, and that is what we were doing here. I don't know her at all. I don't know any more about her than you could by watching every documentary, whatever the fuck. So yeah, like, no, I haven't talked to them, but it is interesting to think about, like, the relationship with it. That's theirs. It's so weird, like, it's weird trying to get closer to a certain subject while actually in every step forward you take, you get further away, but that's, you know, that's where that's art.
Well, I think that enigma is the reason why so many folks are gravitating towards your performance in this film, so I wanna thank you. I wanna thank all of you for showing up this evening and supporting